Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. This is our second half of the live show. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Don't forget, we're brought to you by Audible.com. That's right, audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You go there, you sign up for free, get a free audio book. I think you get a month's free audio books. It's the greatest deal in town. All you got to do is go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. It's so easy. Just do it just to make me happy, okay? Because please, guys, I look at those numbers and I want to see some people go over there. I'm not wasting my time here. Now, we had the Reverend Pinkney on. I'm going to have a link on the Opperman Report blog to all his information where you can go and help support him and mail checks for him and mail letters and all that kind of stuff. Okay, now we're joined now with Michael Gray, who's a frequent caller, and he's the owner of InfinityHomeplans.com. Joe DeToma, who actually lived in the Bronx and used to actually, Joe, you used to actually guard the churches that were being robbed by this group, right?
Right. We didn't realize that group, but we knew that people were breaking into the churches because back then they didn't lock up churches. I think they started doing it recently. Churches, by consent, were open 24 hours a day, and people were breaking into the churches and taking the communal hosts and not much else, but maybe sometimes a chalice if they could get their hands on if it was left out. But they were taking the hosts to be used in black masses. So we would stay up in the churches at night. They would ask us, a bunch of the young men in the neighborhood, how about taking turns? And we did. That's what we would do. Yeah. Then it turned out later that it looked like this group was the Process Church.
Right. Now, we're also joined by Mike Marinacci, who was on a couple of weeks ago, and he's the author of all those books, the weird, what's it called, Weird Stuff in California?
Weird California, Mysterious California, Weird Hauntings, and I also wrote the foreword to Adam Gorightly's The Shadow over Santa Susana.
Right, and we're all members of this group, on this Maury Terry group. Now, we're also joined by area code 504. Now, who's that?
This is Sarah DeLand.
Hey, how are you, Sarah? How are you? Okay, so,
Sarah.
Well, Sarah, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Sarah, and how you got involved in all this?
Okay, I'm a forensic psychiatrist in New Orleans. I work for Tulane University, and I discovered the ultimate evil back in the late 80s or early 90s and have read it several times. I'm in the midst of rereading it. It's always first on my list of favorite books. And so I was really happy when I discovered this group.
Okay, and Mike, you want to tell us who you are and how you got involved in the group?
Well, I've been interested in the Ultimate Evil and the Son of Sam case for quite a long time. I remember being 16 years old when it was happening, and even though I lived on the West Coast, it was very, very big news where we were. It was the commentary at the time I remember was, well, now New York's got one of these crazy cults too, killer cults too. It's not just California anymore. And I got involved with the group because I've really always enjoyed the book and always thought there was more going on behind Berkowitz than the official story says. And I enjoy reading the postings there and contributing what I can, and also sort of exploring the connections between activities in Southern California and the Bay Area and what was and is going on in the New York City region vis-a-vis the individuals and organizations that seem to be behind the killings and some other things.
Yeah, and it seems like, that it's all connected, man. It's all connected to the Manson family, to even like the Temple of Set and Aquino, and they're all... These connections come up all the time. Even, I had on that guy who thinks his father is the Zodiac, Gary L. Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we invited him to the group as well, too, and the author of the book. Mm-hmm. And he was coming out with some stuff in the after show that we did about how his father knew Anton LaVey and also knew Bobby Bouzoulet from the Manson family.
I know there was a fairly strong link between LaVey and Bouzoulet. I actually met and had dinner with Anton LaVey many years ago as interviewing him as part of my research, and hung out in the Black House, which is now gone. It was condemned and ripped down. I believe we've got condos there now. Fascinating character. I always say with him, I think he was first and foremost an old carny barker who really knew how to play up sensation and shock, and made a whole kind of funny career out of that. He, I think, was basically harmless. The people around him, some of the people connected with him, much less so. Beausoleil being a prime example. But that's my own take, having actually spent time with the man and done a bit of research on the COS and the groups that spun out of it. Again, Aquino, who was really kind of his lieutenant in the COS for a while until he split off and formed the Temple of Set. I don't know nearly as much about him, and what I've heard is a bit more disconcerting.
But wasn't Anton LaVey? Isn't Anton LaVey's son? Doesn't he claim that he was castrated?
I haven't heard that one. I know there's all sorts of stories and rumors about LaVey and the people around him and his kids. I have not heard that one. The other one that I heard was that his what was it? His son was he was actually the father of his daughter's son, or there was some incestual relationship going on, or something really crazy. And I really have not paid too much attention to the group ever since he passed on. It's in other hands now. I actually know a couple people who are card-carrying members, but generally it hasn't held too much of my interest since he hasn't been around anymore. So
gotcha.
I couldn't really tell you.
Hey, Joe DeToma, can you tell us how you got involved in a group? In
the TUE group, I read the book many years ago. Of course, having known Berkowitz as kids, we went to summer school together one year. He kind of hung out. He didn't really hang out with anybody, truthfully. I think, truthfully, that's how he wound up in Yonkers with this group of degenerates, because he had no friends in the Bronx. He's kind of standoffish. He was kind of nerdy, but with an attitude, No one knew quite how to take him. No one really liked him. Matter of fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine today that had him in her math class, and she said he always creeped her out. So having heard that, and then when the issues came up, I don't know if you remember the story, but one Halloween, the back window of my car got shot out. And it was right after I had a run-in with him and a couple of his friends, who I think were the Carr brothers. I was going on the Bronx River Parkway, and he lived near the Bronx River Parkway. And the back window of my car shot out. We found a 22 caliber from an M16 and among the shattered glass. And I said, what the hell was going on? I just couldn't picture it, so, I just figured, well, someone just took a pot shot at me. Then the next year, the Son of Sam killing started, and then when it came out that it was Berkowitz involved in it, I said, shut up, bitch, that's some gun. Blew out the back of my window. So I was fascinated with it, and I got into it from there. Plus the Bronx was very weird back then. You're from the Bronx, you might remember.
Yeah, from the Soundview Avenue in the Bronx, between
the lower end. But that's kind of where he lived on Stratford, so it was not far from you. But it was a weird feeling. There was a lot of odd things happening, finding pentagrams in the woods and, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Ever since I was a kid. And it goes back to when I was a kid in the early 60s. So it was nothing that just happened in the 70s when Manson showed up. It was when Berkowitz showed up. It was going back to the early 60s. We were finding dead dogs and pentagrams and all these odd places. And whenever there was woods in a park, there would be carved out an area in the park where these things would take place. It was just an odd feeling, A lot of pedophiles. It was rampant with pedophiles.
Hey Joe.
Yeah, but
have you guys seen his latest interviews from prison? Do you think he's sincere that he's changed? And he seems changed. He doesn't seem,
Well, he seems it. but he also isn't talking.
Yeah, that's
isn't naming
yeah,
any names.
yeah.
You know, you would think if that's the case. I mean, his daddy's dead now. I don't know who he has to protect except his sister or his half sister, who was also in a coven.
Oh, really?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell us that. See, this is the kind of stuff we want to get into.
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
I don't know much about it. She was a different group, you know. I didn't hang out. See, I went to a private school in New Rochelle. I lived in the Bronx, but I went to New Rochelle. So, like, it was kind of a different group. I only hung out with them on the weekends, that kind of thing. So I really never knew her. I didn't really know him, except that I think he kind of had a crush on my first wife's friend.
Well, wait a second, Joe. Now, his sister was they lived together, or she was in an adopted sister as well?
I think she was his half sister.
But they grew up together in the same house?
For a short time, yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think for a few years. I think Maury knows that story better. But I think they lived together for a couple of years. But I believe she was older. Yeah, I believe she was older.
I think it is, having dealt with a bunch of people in prison for long periods of time, and some of them who have committed really heinous crimes. My brother actually was David Berkowitz's psychiatrist for one day up in upstate New York. But it's those long periods of time with nothing to do but think, and getting older and realizing that you've got to make the best out of this confined situation, and then you start thinking about what's going to happen at the end. Before I started doing this work, I was more skeptical than I am now of genuine changes. And I do think that there is nothing like prison and having done some horrible things in your life to cause someone to focus on trying to make some changes. So I think it's possible just because of those circumstances. And I think he's kind of a guy that just is not a free thinker, I don't think he's ever been a free thinker. I think he's been very susceptible to trying to find something to belong to.
Right.
Well,
I agree. Because as a kid, he didn't have any. We didn't know anybody he hung out with. There was no group of friends. Everybody had their clique. He didn't seem to have one. Yeah.
Did you see the interview I sent you, Joe, and where he said his mother confided to a friend before she died that she didn't think her son loved her?
Oh, no.
And the friend told him that after she died.
She told
biological or adoptive?
No, that was his mother.
The adopted one or the biological mother?
The biological mother told a friend before she died, at the end of her life, that she did not think that her son loved her. And he was shocked when the friend told him that. And he said, yeah, I love my mother, But, kind of interesting that maybe he didn't show her affection, or maybe they weren't, affectionate toward one another.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think he thought the same thing about her.
I don't know.
That's sort of the impression I got from reading about the brief relationship that he had with the strained relationship that he had with his biological mother. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if there was much of a relationship between him when he found his biological mother, and how much there was there, or how much that had an effect. Did he find her before these murders started?
You're asking me? I don't know.
Anybody? Did anybody know?
I believe he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
No, does anybody know anything about the stuff like that when Berkowitz was in the military? That people were saying that he was using LSD and stuff in the military as well. Does anybody have any information on that? Or what could have gone on there?
No, but I do know he came back a lot weirder.
Right.
Whatever was left of him came back completely different. Because that's when I had that final run-in with him, that Halloween, I think it was in '75, I think. Yeah, he was completed. There was nobody home when they looked in his eyes.
Really?
No.
And by that point, he was already doing the kind of the killing the dogs and stuff like that in Untermeyer Park and that kind of stuff.
Probably they were finding them there and in Van Cortlandt Park. Yeah. Even in behind my house in Seton Falls Park, I lived up by Baychester Avenue. They're even in there. Every place there was a stand of trees. It seemed like there was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because like how the story goes is, and back in, I guess it was 1976, 77, the summer of 76, right? Or 77 it was. There was a series of murders in New York City of young women. They were getting shot, parked in cars, and walking down the street and stuff like that. And the murderer started sending letters to Jimmy Breslin and to the New York Daily News and stuff like that. It became a big celebrity case of this big celebrity serial killer. But then after they caught Berkowitz and they searched his home, the home had been ransacked and disrupted, and ordered that graffiti was painted on the walls. They moved furniture out and to make him look like he was crazy. Then after Berkowitz was convicted, he later came out and started admitting to, I think it was Maury Terry originally, that he was part of the Satanic cult with these brothers, John and Mark Carr, who were the sons of Sam Carr, who lived right behind him in a house right behind where his apartment was. And that's who owned the dog that Berkowitz had claimed, oh, this dog made me do it, which was this crazy story that he made up. And a lot of people, too, think that he pled insanity, that he used an insanity plea, but he didn't. He pled guilty to these crimes. Then after meeting with Maury Terry, he confessed to a lot of stuff about involvement in this satanic cult with nationwide connections, including the Arlis Perry case and this group that this Process Church of the Final Judgment that had connections to Manson and stuff. And I'd like to read this document that Maury Terry just put on the blog November 3rd, just a couple of days ago. And this is a police report from the Immigration and Nationalization Service. And what it says is, further information received from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office indicates that subject organization ordered the death of Sharon Tate by Manson. They're talking about the Process Church. This information is not directly corroborated. Manson states he had no relationship with the process, but his followers, while incarcerated at the Los Angeles County Jail, were embroidering process emblems on articles of clothing they were making. Also, the process sent a representative to obtain a document prepared by Manson in jail about death. And I believe that was their magazine that was titled Death at the time. Then there's some part that's whited out, that Maury Terry whited out that we're not allowed to see, okay? But then it says, information that Sirhan, convicted slayer of Robert F. Kennedy, was contacted by the process and had attended some parties given by television personalities in behalf of the organization, where rites took place, usually dealing with sexual deviations and heavy drug use. Now, one of these parties took place at Sharon Tate's home. Okay, then Los Angeles investigators, Los Angeles was able to disclose that John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas singing group was providing money for the organization's operations in Los Angeles, California in 1967 and 1968. It goes on to say that LAPD provided a statement from a close associate of Victor Wilde, indicating his part in the organization. He is the organization's representative to the motorcycle clubs in California, which the organization intended to use to cause havoc and destruction in line with teachings of the organization. Wilde was made a high official in the organization by Robert de Grimson, who lived in Staten Island, by the way, in 1968 and has been since. And the rest of the document is whited out. Now, that's a pretty incredible INS document.
Yeah, pretty. It goes to show you how much they knew way back then.
Right.
No one's ever done anything with it.
You'd think this would be front page news.
Yeah, it would be if you didn't try to hide. If you had something to hide, you wouldn't make it front page news now.
Yeah.
What was the point of killing Sharon Tate, though? Why was she targeted specifically?
Well, I remember hearing that they had a party with a drug dealer the week before, and they beat the drug dealer, and the drug dealer had connections to the drug dealers of the Process Church, and they told Manson to make an example of everybody in the house. From what I understand, because the Frykowski guy was dealing drugs, he was using his girlfriend's money, Folger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Abigail Folger.
Right. And they used that money to, feed their drug cartel that they had going on.
Yeah. Well, Mike, what is you're pretty familiar with the Manson stuff because you helped write the book you wrote the foreword for the book, the Santa Susanna book for Adam Gorightly. What do you think was the motivation behind the Manson murders?
I think there were several. I think number one, Manson was a frustrated musician who had been trying to make it in the business and had been pestering all sorts of music industry related people, particularly Terry Melcher, who was the previous resident of that house. So Manson was quite familiar with the house, the layout, the people that would hang out there, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he was just enraged at, part of it was he was enraged at the music industry and for rejecting him. I think part of it was the crazy helter-skelter stuff that he was using, this very paranoid, apocalyptic scenario he was preaching to his people as a motivation to do the killings. And I think part of it did have to do with drug business and drug deals gone bad. All of the violence that had happened before, whether it was the killing of Gary Hinman in Topanga Canyon or the attempted murder of Bernard Crowe, a.k.a. Lapsapapa, in L.A., everything violent he did beforehand all had to do with drug deals gone bad. And I think there was enough evidence that, as we mentioned earlier, Frykowski and Folger had a lot of connections, a lot of business going on in that world, that I think that was a third motivation. So it was really a combination of things. It was just, to use kind of a tiresome cliche, it was a perfect storm of reasons to go to the house and do what's often referred to as a blackout, which is when everybody on site is killed, so that there are no witnesses.
But did Roman Polanski know it was he involved?
No, I think he may have known something was going on, or there were some very untoward things going on. But he was, at the time, I believe he was in Europe working on a film, and I think he was not really connected with whatever happened. He may have suspected that there were some very unsavory things going on around that house and around the associates of his wife, but I don't think he was in a position to do anything about it or really know too much. And again, when the murders happened, he was in Europe.
I always thought he was punished for revealing too much in Rosemary's Baby.
I don't know about that.
I've heard that, yeah.
But I'll tell you this: it's very interesting that I interviewed Scott Michaels, who did the documentary 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. And in that documentary, he talks about how Polanski broke into Papa Phillips' house. He went to John Phillips' house, broke into his house to steal his address book to see if the handwriting in his address book was the same as the handwriting on the wall. So he suspected Papa Phillips of being involved.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great documentary.
Yeah. I know that I keep seeing John Phillips's name pop up in all of the things having to do with the Manson case, and of course with Dave McGowan's various writings about Laurel Canyon, the whole scene there. And most recently, of course, he's been dead for quite a few years, but most recently there were the revelations by his daughter Mackenzie that they had this very long-term incestuous relationship. And I've read his memoirs and read a lot of the stuff about him. I always thought Philip sounded like a bit of a scumbag, but that kind of clinched it for me, reading that. So I'm not surprised at all that he just seemed to be connected with such sketchy people and scenes around there.
Well, that makes a whole lot more sense, the issue with Mackenzie Phillips and her father, than sort of the original story of just that she was completely left on her own and somehow managed to get into all of these parties and drugs and sex things, and it was sort of almost implied that it was just pure, you go out and do your thing. It makes a whole lot more sense that her father would have been involved in introducing her to.
Yeah, it seems that she just wound up in the same things that he was doing, like just by coincidence,
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was something going on there for sure. Which is so creepy too, because if you see her in American Graffiti, all her scenes in that movie are pretty creepy to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's very androgynous for one thing. She really is dresses and looks and talks like a teenage boy, and I always thought that there was something very off about that. Particularly when it takes place in 1962, before the sexual revolution and gay pride and what we've got now with transsexualism and whatever. This is just very strange, this character.
How could she not be?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a whole theory about how the Laurel Canyon groups are connected, like Dave McGowan's work, which I happen to think is fascinatingly possible. And they're all related to the military and the, higher-ups in government. And they indoctrinate their kids. Pedophilia, incestuous pedophilia, is a way to break down a kid's mind, ego, so you can mold him or her into another personality.
You know what? Yeah, I've had McGowan on 3 times now, and I definitely agree with almost everything he says. Even some of his other conclusions on other things, I think he's tuned into something. He's on the right track on a lot of stuff. And another thing, too, I see about him, it doesn't seem like he's being propelled out there to shoot his story at us in some kind of controlled fashion. It seems to be coming out of his own head, from his own brain. And he's not some kind of controlled opposition that we need to be worried about. Well, at least I hope so, because I've been endorsing him all over the place. So, yeah.
But again, you have these connections all over the place. I think, as I mentioned to you in a private phone call, a very close friend of mine of college, McGowan was her boyfriend in college.
Oh, really?
And she just met one day out of nowhere. She said, "Mike, have you ever heard of David McGowan? He's, you'd like him. He's very much into this conspiracy stuff." What? That Dave McGowan? Yeah. It's so. It's funny how these connections just pop up out of nowhere. Often, I don't think these things are really conscious conspiracies. As I said on the last show, I think often it's just people that are involved in fringe worlds of one kind or another, whether that's drugs or conspiracy theories or non-traditional religion or military intelligence or what have you, just all kind of tend to start gathering together and cross-pollinating. And there may not be any real conscious thought behind it. It's just the fact these people are all, these demimondes all begin to kind of overlap. But I don't know. I keep an open mind.
Someone could be putting all these different groups in the same orbit so that they eventually bang into each other for whatever reason that can be guided along.
Yeah.
The helter-skelter item is just fascinating because that's also the basic tenet of the Process Church.
Right.
Was to cause havoc. The Beatles came up with the song Helter-Skelter. Paul McCartney was a somewhat associated with the Process Church in London. I posted that on our page the other day. He had a pseudonym called Ian Yakumo.
Right.
Which is supposedly his name backwards, is what his name sounds like backwards vocally. And that's the writer of Paperback Writer, is Ian Yakumo. and that's the owner of the Indica Galleries, where Anita Pallenberg and Marianne Faithfull hung out, and they all related to the Process Church.
And that's where John met Yoko.
Yeah. And plus, there's a Process magazine in London at the time, and someone named Ian Giacomo, claiming to be a Polish director, movie director, which is fascinating, because Roman Polanski, of course, was a Polish movie director, was taking out ads looking for young women to voluntarily participate in satanic ritual abuse scenarios.
So I'll tell you, I was. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. I was going to. That just reminded me of something. Is when the Shadow over Susanna was published, we had a publishing a book party for it at this. What is it? The Soap Plant La Luz de Jesus in the Los Feliz district in Los Angeles. And I read there, Adam did, a couple other people were reading, and the person in the audience, and I was astonished that he was there, was Mick Farren. Mick Farren, very famous British rock journalist who sort of divided time between London and Los Angeles and New York, and was sort of, in many ways, kind of a pioneer of punk rock. He had a band called the Deviants in the late 60s that were very proto-punk, very kind of ahead of their time. He was very close with the people involved with the Indica Gallery, and talks about them very extensively in his memoir, which is called Give the Anarchist a Cigarette, and it's a fascinating book. But I wondered, what is he doing here? And then I read later about the connections with the Indica Gallery, and then what you're talking about now, and it's just now it starts to make a little sense. Another person who's no longer with us, he was already in pretty bad health at the time he was there, and I believe a couple of years later he passed on.
Well, there's an audio recording of Paul McCartney where he says he believes in magic with a K. Yeah. Yeah, and that album that the Beatles did where they're walking across Abbey Road, with there's a Volkswagen there and everything. That picture was taken the same time the Manson murders were going on.
No,
wow.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's by the way, too, and also, too, on the wall in one of the Manson hideouts, I don't know which one exactly, but it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven. That was written on that doorway before the Beatles sang the song.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And it was in that documentary, right, that the haunted house was in Disneyland was dedicated the day of the Manson murders.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And what's interesting is they say, remember there's 999 ghosts in this mansion, and one of them will follow you home?
No, I don't know that. I don't go in that haunted house that much when I go to Disneyland. It's kind of boring.
That's my second favorite attraction there. My favorite is Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Okay. Yeah, we went to the Haunted Mansion like once or twice, and that was it. We never went back.
I mean, the really obvious connection between the Beatles and Ritual Magic, of course, is the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, where in that whole gallery of faces, one of the faces there of people we like, as they explain later, is Aleister Crowley.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But also, too, in Help, they're doing the Crowley, the arm movements with those. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in Help.
Yeah.
So way back in Help, they were into Crowley.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know, man. I like the Beatles, but I don't trust them. We can't,
Well, half of them are dead now.
Yeah, and
they called it the British invasion. At the same time as the Process Church was also a British invasion. You think about it, you wonder how much of this stuff comes from
right
the other side of the pond, as they say. Tom Sheridan would have probably something to say about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he's coming on because it's really late over there, and I think he's asleep. Yeah, he's not on. Yeah, too bad. I would have, but we'll do another one. I was even thinking maybe we should because Chet Walker, that's his name, right? Chet Walker.
Chet Walker.
Yeah. He was saying what we should do is go through one chapter per show.
Yeah.
And do like 20 shows on this, and I'm on a lot of nights of the week, man. We can go on live like one night a week on one of these stations and just devote it just to this topic, man, and really go through the book and really get this information out there. Because if you think of it, if this is true, and it does seem to be, it's earth-shattering information, because even this Process Church, man, goes way back, this connection to the Kennedy assassination. Because the same lawyer in New Orleans that incorporated the Process Church also incorporated that group of bishops. I talked to you about this, Mike Marinacci, right, the other day?
Oh, yes. Yeah. One of the independent Catholic churches there, yeah.
Yeah.
The Episcopi, I forgot that. The traveling bishops.
Yeah, wandering bishops.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know several of them, too. I know several people who have independent episcopates. Again, because of my own interests and connections.
Yeah, all those ghost shows on TV, they always bring in a priest for an exorcism. It's not a Catholic priest. It's that from that group.
Oh, really? Hey, you know what, Joe? When you talk a little closer to the mouthpiece on your phone, okay?
Oh, I'm pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, do you ever see The Godfather?
Yeah.
In the scene where they're doing the baptism of the baby and at the same time killing all the people, all the enemies of Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
That priest is one of those Episcopi.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you know
that goes.
What's that?
What you mean, in the movie or in real life?
The priest in the movie. No, the priest in the movie is an actual priest of this church, of this.
Oh, yeah. And again, the George Lucas and what's his name, the director of that movie, Francis Ford Coppola.
Right.
Interesting. Francis Ford Coppola's son was beheaded.
Right.
Yeah. Did not know that.
Yeah, tell us that story, Michael.
Me?
Great, yeah.
Ryan O'Neal's son.
Right.
Ryan O'Neal's son were on a speedboat and they were just, zipping around on the water.
Right.
And they were, I guess, Ryan O'Neal's son was drinking, and there was a boat tugging another boat with a wire, and they didn't see the flag, and they went through the boat, and the wire just took the kid's head right off.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember that story, but I had forgotten that it was Francis Ford Coppola's son.
Yeah, Francis Ford Coppola's son. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole family is very.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage, man's involved in all those New World Illuminati movies and stuff like that.
And isn't it funny that Nicolas Cage, he got duped out of all his money?
Yeah, that usually happens too.
Just like Kevin Bacon and Cursor, and now he's got to do all these crappy movies because he's broke.
Well, that's the way to keep them in. That's how you keep them under the wing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That and there's a lot of those. Not to keep looping these things together, but there's a lot of people whose careers suddenly take off after they lose a child.
Right. Or there's always a death around them. Like even Lady Gaga, her musical partner, got thrown out a window.
Right.
Before she became famous.
And look up Ashton Kutcher's brother. He died.
Right.
Right.
We were talking about Joan Baez on the website the other day, and her sister was married to Farina, who was another folk music singer, who was probably the only person that could have given Dylan a run for his money,
Richard Farina. Yeah.
And he died mysteriously in a motorcycle accident. The same time that the Crossroads album came out, where Dylan kind of said that he may have sold his soul to the devil. Selling your soul, you're supposed to do it at a crossroads. I don't know if you know that. It's an old tradition, but you're supposed to go to a crossroads to sell your soul to a devil at midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning. And
that was always attributed to Robert Johnson. He'd done that, the old blues man. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny how the only person who and everybody ever thought, and they were all friends, Joan Baez and Dylan and Mimi, Joan's sister, and her husband, this Farina. But he was the only guy that they said had a chance of giving Dylan a run for his money. And,
Did you say Joan Baez, right? Joan Baez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a song, one of her songs. I don't know the lyrics to it, but basically, you could tell she was a victim of
Satanic
Satan.
ritual abuse.
Yeah, that's how the topic came
Play
up.
me backwards. Yeah.
Right, I'm looking for it right now, and I'll read some of the words if I can find it.
There's a man from Mexico win scarlet and prick a finger and blood.
Yeah.
It's pretty graphic.
Play me backwards. Yeah.
And when you think about it, they bring Mexico into it a lot, and when you think about the farm that they found in Mexico outside Brownsville, where they found dead bodies of almost 200 students that were missing.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone always wondered why George Bush, one of the richest families in the world, why George W. Bush and Lauren Bush decided to live in Brownsville. Brownsville is just over the border. It's a few miles from this town in Mexico, Matamoros, Mexico.
Right.
Where they found the satanic cult.
Yeah.
And this guy was supposedly performing satanic rituals because he was a drug dealer. And these rituals were supposed to keep his drug dealers invisible to police.
Wow.
So they could travel and sell drugs and right under policemen's noses and no one would see them. So they were killing all these students. And it was said that George W. Bush belonged to that cult. Well, the suppliers of the cult were Henry Lee Lucas and his partner, Otis Toole. Otis Toole.
Mm-hmm.
And the only death sentence that George W. Bush ever commuted while he was governor of Texas was Henry Lee Lucas's.
Wait a second. Is it a fact that Toole and Lucas supplied victims to that cult?
That's what they said.
That's what they
Henry
said?
Lee Lucas said.
Did they
a lot
say,
of people are saying he was lying and over-exaggerating.
Right.
But he's the one that came up with it out of nowhere. The only people investigating that cult were Texas Rangers.
I think it's real interesting that that they whoever they are in quotes
Right.
tried again to really downplay that by turning that guy into just some money-hungry psychopath who just like duped all these people into believing that he was this, cult master and could help them. It wasn't basically implying that it really wasn't a satanic cult. He was just pretending like it was in order to control people. And I think that that's just indicative of maybe people are just too freaked out to actually report it. Maybe it's just too frightening.
I mean, Lauren Bush killed her ex-boyfriend. At the same time in Brownsville, Texas. During this time, she ran him over supposedly by accident.
No. They said it was a homeless person.
Oh, I thought it was her ex-boyfriend.
Oh, no. Wait, the George Bush's wife went through a stop sign and crashed into her boyfriend, who she had just had a fight with on the phone, and was racing over to see him. And then her father was a judge or a local politician, and she skated out of that, man, with no problem.
Oh, I thought they said she ran over a homeless guy.
No,
in
the middle of the
night. They might have said that.
One of those deaths attributed in the orbit or circle of famous people.
Well, Marvin Bush, there was an accident in front of his house where he crashed his car into his maid, his housekeeper.
Really?
Or her own car crashed into her, but she died in his driveway, being run over by a car that was either she was driving it. I think it was she was driving it. Okay, and she drove over herself. Okay.
You ever see all the accidents in The Omen?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, sometimes I think the movie industry is a little more out in the open than they're just giving us a signal of what really is going on.
Hey, Mike.
Well, they got Scientology steeped in there, and God only knows where that fits in all of this.
Right.
Yes.
Well, they're tied in. The process was an offshoot of Scientology.
Did you see that Dick Cheney tried to kill his lawyer friend?
Yeah.
With a shotgun?
Yeah.
Shot him in the face with a burn gun.
Yeah, but that might have been an accident, man, because I think if Dick Cheney wanted to kill somebody, he could do a lot more quietly and without pulling the trigger himself.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a way to send a message.
Yeah, that's true, too.
This guy was a district attorney in Texas.
And then not only that,
kind of investigation going on when this happened, and it's a way to get people to back off. Yeah.
And let's not forget, he gets shot in the face. Mm-hmm. The pellet matriculates to his heart. He has a heart attack on the table and almost dies. And then a week later, he has a news conference, and he apologizes to Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's
I'd like to apologize to Dick Cheney for putting him through this. Like, holy shit.
For putting my face in front of that shotgun.
My wife and I would like to apologize
I don't know what
to
is.
Cheney.
If that's not a message to everyone, I don't know what is.
Don't mess with Dick Cheney.
Okay, we got another call coming in. Let's see who it is. Okay. All right, 845. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, who are you and what do you got to say?
Chet Walker. Just tell Ed to go with my idea to do a chapter a week on the Ultimate Evil.
I like that idea. I am Ed. This is Ed here. Okay. And
I'm typing on your board.
Okay, and I like that idea. And I think that's something, because like I was telling the guys before, I'm on a bunch of stations, so we can pick one night and go live on another night during the week. Like I'm thinking maybe Saturday night on Para X, because there's a really smart group over there, by the way. In that chat room, those are really smart guys at 7 o'clock over on Para X Radio Network. And they're not familiar with this story at all. So maybe what we'll do is, once I get this whole situation straightened out with the mixer and Sam broadcasting and all this kind of technical stuff I got to figure out, we'll do one show a month, on this story, because there's just so much to get into and it goes all over the place. Yeah. Hey, so Chet, man, you got any other questions or anything you want to ask?
Yeah, keep it good workup.
Okay, bro. Have a good night.
All the best.
Thanks.
You got Chet.
Okay. Yeah, he's a good guy. I like him. Now, let me read some of this stuff from this song, though, from Joan Baez. She says, "You don't have to play me backwards to get the meaning of my verse. You don't have to die and go to hell to feel the devil's curse." And then she goes on a little bit here and gets really crazy after that. I've seen them light the candles. I've heard them bang the drum. And I've cried, "Mama, I'm cold as ice, and I've got no place to run. Let the night begin. There's a pop of skin and the sudden rush of scarlet. There's a little boy riding on a goat's head and a little girl playing the harlot. There's a sacrifice in an empty church of sweet little baby Rose, and a man in a mask from Mexico is peeling off my clothes." Now that's pretty intense stuff from the first person text,
Yeah. Sweet little baby Rose, Rosemary's Baby. See?
Oh, that's kind of interesting too. Yeah, I didn't take that. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a baby sacrifice. They call it Rosemary's. I guess when they sacrifice a baby, it's called
Kate
a
was pregnant when it happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I sent out a message to Joan Baez, her people, to see if we can get her on the show, and I'll bring her on the show, but we'll talk about a lot of stuff. But that'll definitely be one of the things we get into for sure.
I was going to say about the Rose reference. In some occult circles, the first the symbolic drawing of blood in a like a blood brother ceremony or something like that. When you get that first symbolic few drops of blood, that's called the Rose of Mysterious Union. And there's a song by the Doors, Jim Morrison, where he uses that phrase because he was actually involved with a Wiccan woman involved in white witchcraft, and I think he'd learned that phrase from her.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now I got a question here. It says, "Ask Mike Marinacci about the connections of Manson to the mafia via the Auto Rings, the Whiskey a Go Go, and the Roxy, and Lino LaBianca's Little Black Book, if you can."
I don't really know too much about that. I know that there are rumors that LaBianca was involved in some of their doings in L.A., At the same time, I've heard objections to that. Well, and being of half Italian descent, I understand this as well. Well, they just say that because you have his Italian last name. There's no real proof. The nightclub scene, all that, yeah, that's been in West Hollywood, the Sunset Strip, that's been dirty for many years. And if you want to read a really creepy account of or case that I've just always wondered what the hell went on. This was actually several years before the killings, and that was the very mysterious death of Bobby Fuller, who was the Texas-based rocker who did "I Fought the Law" and a few other songs. He apparently had gotten on the bad side of some people in the nightclub owners and people in that whole scene in L.A. and died under very strange circumstances. I can't really give you the details right now. I don't remember all of them, but it's about the weirdest death in rock and roll I've ever seen. It was ruled a suicide initially, even though he had obviously been beaten and things had been done around the scene that would just a suicide would not do. So that's one I've always wondered about in that particular milieu. But Manson's actually very early in his life in prison, it's his biographer said that I forget which mob figure he was, but the mob figure kind of took him under his wing when he was a very young man in the joint and taught him some techniques of how to manipulate people and intimidate them to get them to do what you want. So that's the extent of the connections there that I'm really aware of. I'm sure there's other people that could describe it in much more detail. But it's funny mentioning the whole West Hollywood and club scene, because there's that immediately reminded me of the Bobby Fuller case. And of course, if you want to talk that more years after that, of course, you had the famous Floor on the Floor murders involving John Holmes and that whole scene, and which were laid at the feet of Eddie Nash, who ran the Starwood and a bunch of other clubs there, and was just a really very, very powerful and very feared independent mob guy. And he wasn't Italian; he was actually Palestinian, but was just kind of an independent operator who just built up a lot of juice and a lot of power over the years. And,
feared by everyone. Feared by everyone,
yeah.
Except for Scott Thornton, who was Liberace's little boy toy, 14 years old, dating Liberace, and also Michael Jackson's lover, okay, who's in jail right now, by the way, too. I'm trying to get him on the show. You know where he lives right now?
Yeah.
He lives on the Bunny Ranch up in Reno. Okay, they got a hold. What's his name? Got a hold of that guy, Hoff, Dennis Hoff.
Yeah.
He lives over there with Dennis Hoff in the Bunny Ranch, and with Dennis Hoff was down here, but he lives at Dennis Hoff's Bunny Ranch. I'm trying to get him on the show, but he's in jail again. Okay, but he testified against Eddie Nash, and they gave him a witness protection program. Now, he's a fascinating guy.
Yeah, well, he also he wrote that book that he made the movie out of, The Other Side of the Candelabra, about his whole relationship with Liberace. He would really be an interesting guest.
Yeah. And you'd think, after doing a movie like that, mainstream movie, you got that PR department behind you, you could stay out of trouble. But they threw him back in jail. They threw him back in jail. Under the jail, they got this guy. I can't get a hold of him.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, can I ask you a question?
Nevada's a tough state.
Yeah.
Was there a connection between Manson and Eddie Nash?
Was that question for me?
Mike.
Yeah.
I thought you might know.
Could not tell you. It would be possible. I know that Nash was definitely had an interest in the drug trade from the very beginning of his career, and of course we know that Manson was skirting around the edges of that scene and doing various deals. So I think there could have very well have been a connection between the two. I just have never seen any evidence of it or any references to it.
Okay.
I think again in that scene, probably in the mid-late '60s, anybody who was running drugs at that then, probably a lot of people just knew each other too. They they may have just been aware of each other, but of course once Helter Skelter happened and he was caught, I'm sure a lot of people who were connected to him just looked the other way. tried to cover up whatever connections they had.
Who? I never knew him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, Captain Manson was also hooked up with the motorcycle club, the Straight Satans.
Oh, yeah.
And they were selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably done through the mob, I would think. You know?
Mm-hmm. At least at the higher levels, the suppliers.
Right.
But then you had a lot of... Yeah. I would always wonder what happened to him. He always intrigued me as, one of the characters in that whole scenario of a guy who was... He was fine doing dirty business and going and rutting with the Manson girls and smoking dope and drinking beer, but when it came to killings, it was, no, I'm out of here. And
well, they thought that he was a narc because of that. They
yeah,
thought he might have been a narc. Yeah.
Yeah. He was Canadian too. He was a Canadian national, but he was in the U.S. at the time. So.
Hey, we're coming up to the end of the hour here, okay, and we're going to keep going on. We do an after show. We can go on as long as we want, but we are going to be dropping Hazy Radio at the end of this hour here. So I want to thank Scott Hare for helping us out producing, as he does every week over at Hazy. But we're going to be continuing on CJ Moore's Radio. And we got with us tonight, we got Mike Gray from InfinityHomePlans.com. Joe DeToma. Hey, Joe DeToma is the author of a book called The Cult of the Black Sun. And I'm going to put a link to that book up in this the blog post for tonight, The Cult of the Black Sun, which dabbles in a lot of these areas here. It's a fictional book because Joe doesn't want to get killed. He wants to get the info out there. And then I'll put Mike Marinacci's. I'll put wait, Joe doesn't want to get killed. And I'll put Mike Marinacci's book on it. He has like 3 or 4 different books. And then what about you, Dina? Right, Doris. Dorothy, right?
Sarah.
504 is Sarah. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a book or something like that?
Nope.
Okay, no book. Okay. Do you have anything you want to promote before we go?
I'm not nearly as important as any of you all.
That's
I
right.
That's what the boss always says.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we only got a couple of minutes, and we're going to drop Hazy Radio. We're going to continue on with the CJMarsRadio.com. I want to thank Scott Hare again. I want to thank Zeta Ost, who's the owner of Hazy Radio. And don't forget, we're going to bring in Joshua Brookshire, too. And also, too, I want everybody to remember before we go tonight, and we drop Hazy, is that good old Reverend Pinckney, okay? The guy, he needs our prayers. He needs our support. And I would really like everybody to, before the night's over, if you can just visit his website and just even send him an email or something like that of support to the good old Reverend Pinckney that was facing 7 years in prison on some garbage, trumped-up forgery charges. It's just ridiculous. But you can reach him. Come on, where's good old Reverend Pinckney here? At bhbanco.org. That's his website. That's where his PayPal thing is. His phone number is 269-925-001. And it's Banco, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. So I think we're going to take a little break here and run some commercials. Cindy, are we all set up to run those commercials now? Okay, great. Thank you. So good night, Scott. Good night, Zeta, over at Hazy. We'll see you guys next week. Next week, we got a really good guest. It's another weird California kind of guy. I forget his name at the moment, but it's going to be another one of those kind of shows.
Yeah.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
If you're looking for essential oils, stop by and check out Essentially Tammy on Facebook. She is Young Living Essential Oils Independent Distributor. These 100% therapeutic-grade oils help support the body's natural functions. You can click on her website posted on Essentially Tammy, that's T-A-M-I, to see the current deals and check out the benefits of oils such as frankincense, joy, valor, lemon, thieves, panaway, and many more. Email Jocko Tammy, that's Jocatami, yahoo.com, or call 352-239-8546. That's 352-239-8546. Hey, don't forget good old Amanda at Pacific West Bamboo. Pacific West Bamboo, 503-839-8126. You can reach her at demroots@oppermail.com. Pacific West Bamboo, your #1 source for timber, construction, and craft-grade bamboo poles, plants, products, and more. They specialize in eco-friendly reclaimed wood products for the home and garden. They're located in Portland, Oregon, servicing the Northwest for over 10 years. They can be reached at 503-839-8126. That's 503-839-8126. Her Facebook page is Pacific West Bamboo. They can and do ship nationwide, and they're currently getting a new line of bamboo flooring, veneers, and laminates made from Guadawa bamboo, one of the world's strongest bamboos, grown and produced and manufactured in Central America using only economically and environmentally friendly practices and standards. Good old Mike Gray at infinityhomeplans.com. Check out Infinity Home Plans and Design Services, your resource for 3D and 2D draftsman services. They offer a multitude of products, including stock home plans, 2D digital drawings, 3D models, renderings, and more. That's infinityhomeplans.com. Hey, don't forget emailrevealer.com. That's my website, emailrevealer.com. And we offer all different kinds of services. Current place of employment locate. Let's say you're trying to locate where your ex-husband or your ex-wife is working so you can collect on child support. You contact us, we can locate their place of employment for you and help you collect on that child support. Let's say you think that your husband or your wife is cheating on you. Give us their email address and we can trace it back to online dating websites and dating services. So we have a multitude of services on emailrevealer.com. Hey, don't forget the New World Mexican Women. Okay, now just Google New World Mexican Women. You can find their book where they first describe their love letters to their men and their sons and their uncles and their brothers who have traveled from South America to North America to work as migrant workers. But the women down in this town there in Guerrero, Mexico, they want their men to come back. So they've written these beautiful love letters, and they've put them all in this beautiful coffee table book. First, the letters are written in Spanish, handwritten. You can see pictures of the people writing the books. And then it comes on after that, and it's typewritten in English. And then also, too, the second half of the book is teaching you how to make authentic Mexican jewelry from these New World Mexican women. You can find their book on lulu.com. It's only $19, or you can download the digital edition for free. That's New World Mexican Women, and it's a two-part book where first part is the love letters, and the second part is the making the handmade jewelry, the authentic Mexican jewelry. But you can also contact them, too, as well, if you want to get a deal on wholesale jewelry from Mexico, from these women.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report After Show. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Don't forget that the show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report, and you sign up for free, and you get a free audiobook. It's free for the whole month. You can get free books almost every day. So we're here now on cjmarsradio.com and 365 Live. You can find the, the archives. Oh, by the way, the archives go up on hazyradio.com, too, during the week, like Sunday or Monday. But you can also find them on youtube.com, on the Opperman Report YouTube channel, and you can also find them on our Spreaker channel. And if you subscribe on both of those spots there, you don't need to contact me and say, hey, when the archive's coming up, because you'll get a notice that it's coming up. If you subscribe on Spreaker, if you follow us on Spreaker, you'll get an email when new content goes up. And just imagine, You won't have to email me and ask me when it's going up. You know, I know it'll be tough. You know, not hearing from me on a Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, when you want to email me. But we've been joined by Joshua Brookshire, who's sort of an expert on Manson, and he's from the band Bookhouse. Hey, Josh, are you playing anywhere this week?
We're playing next Saturday in the Washington, D.C. suburbs of Arlington, Virginia.
What's the name of the club?
It's a record store. We're playing a record store show at the CD Cellar in Arlington, Virginia.
Ah, very good. Okay, now before we get to Josh, now Joe, you were just telling us some stuff about Sirhan, and we were talking about his psychiatrist was the same one. It was Berkowitz's psychiatrist.
Well, actually, yeah, two of them. There's Bernard Diamond, who was one psychiatrist, and another one in New York City was a Schwartz. I forgot his first name, but Schwartz was a CIA kind of psychiatrist involved in the MK Ultra program that was supposedly discontinued in the 1970s. But Schwartz's specialty, in his words, I read somewhere, was that he would put into people's minds the idea that a crime was committed. They were told to commit a crime by a demon, which kind of is exactly what Berkowitz came up with after talking to the psychiatrist. Was the demon dog told him to kill everybody, and yeah, so it's pretty interesting. They were also had dealings with Sirhan. Yeah.
Right now,
and I believe Mark David I think one of them also had interviewed Mark David Chapman.
Well, that's fascinating. Now, one thing I found interesting, too, is now David Berkowitz, one of the things he told Maury Terry was about the connections of the Process Church to the murder of Arlis Perry in California. And it turns out that her husband, I think his name is Bruce Perry, he's a psychologist. And he got involved in giving therapy to the children at Waco, the siege of Waco.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so, did you ever meet him, Sarah?
No, have not. I didn't know that. There's connections popping up everywhere. It's really overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like playing 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
And it seems like everybody's in on it but us.
Right.
The 6 people on this call are the only ones I can trust.
The name that keeps popping up in psychology too is Jolly and West. I think.
Oh yes.
Infamous, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's that? Tell us.
Well, he was the guy they did for McVeigh. He was the psychologist they called for McVeigh, and I can't remember the other one that they used them for.
Do you know Michael Marinacci?
I have heard the name again and again connected with alleged mind control programs. I know he was part of something at UCLA, like the Center for the Study of Violence, or something like that. I recall that he had connections with the JFK. I'm sorry?
With Cameron up in
Titanic guy?
Canada.
No.
Oh.
No, just a really brutal Canadian psychiatrist who did all sorts of awful things. Yeah.
Wasn't he also Jack Ruby's psychiatrist?
That's
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought so. I thought that name sounded familiar.
You know, it's kind of interesting too that the Church of Scientology has that group that hates psychiatrists. You know. And now what do you think the motivation behind that is? Because if they got all these psychologists on their, obviously working on that team, why would the Scientologists be able to discredit them?
Because I think that L. Ron Hubbard appears from what I've read about him to have suffered from bipolar disorder and had these really manic and psychotic episodes, and ended up being hospitalized more than once, and was adamantly angry then and in denial of the fact that any type of mental illness existed, and it was all an evil plot dreamed up to control people. And that's my understanding of where that came from. So mentioning the fact that it's possible that there's mental illness and psychiatrists is like, blasphemy, I guess.
Yeah. As a longtime student of the whole scene around Scientology and Hubbard, I would agree. I think the man had it was really his whole personal fear. I know I'd once been told, well, he was secretly terrified that if he was ever taken in and examined by a psychiatrist, that he'd be committed. And so it became this whole thing of to wipe out psychiatry because it was evil and because mental illness, as commonly understood, does not exist. There's a whole period, and right after he got, I think when this really started happening, right after he got out of the Navy in World War II, where he was beginning to be observed very closely because of his personality and some things he'd done during the war, and I think that's where he really began to develop this hatred of the whole, what he calls psychs, that whole world.
Hey, Josh, I know you called in because you want to talk about some Manson stuff. What do you got on your mind?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is my audio coming through all right?
You're okay.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I know. But like you were saying about connecting things and how there are people on the call that maybe we have the information and we don't know how to put it together. There's one thing that I definitely think connects the process with you to Joe DiToma's Black Sun onto my question that I'm grateful that you relayed to Mr. Marinici. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, sir. And
Marinacci, close enough.
Marinacci, I'm sorry, man. My bad, dude.
That's okay.
But connecting it with Charles Manson, I don't know if anybody's ever watched the documentary Charles Manson Superstar, directed by Nicholas Schreck, the former Satanist who's actually married to Dina LaVey. But there's a comment in there about how Charles Manson really believes in the Gnostic deity of Abraxas, the temporal demon that controls both good and evil. And if you look at the process ideology, despite its obvious leanings towards National Socialism, they do believe in the extreme duality of good versus evil, and they see themselves as the agents of chaos that are going to initiate Armageddon. So there's this part in his interview where he talks about receiving a letter from none other than Rudolf Hess before he died, the Nazi war criminal.
Oh, yeah.
And Charles Manson wrote him a letter, right? A whole, long spiel. And Rudolf Hess replied with one word, and that was Abraxas. So that ties in the Nazi leanings of the Process Church with the avowed white supremacist ideology of Charles Manson. And it goes just in one big circle, so it's hard to deny these things. I don't know if anybody on this call has ever heard that before. Comment.
No, the Abraxas thing, I've never heard that one. About the Rudolf Hess has fascinated me since I was a kid. They kept the whole prison open just for this one guy.
Yeah, in Spandau prison, I believe the name was.
What was he?
He was the one.
They want to know. Yeah.
He was the one that flew into England, right, and got caught.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And got caught.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, they said he was flying to Aleister Crowley's castle, is what they said.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
he went down in Scotland.
Yeah, he got shot down in Scotland.
Yeah. So, although by that time, I think Crowley had long given up that castle by Loch Ness. At that point, he was just a broke pensioner living in London. But still, that he went to Scotland is interesting.
Well, so was there a meeting set up between Hess and the Royals to discuss them? Because what I heard was they were going to do a back deal with the Nazis and basically turn England over to the Nazis.
Well, that was the thought, was, but what the history books had said. It was all in Hess's head. But he was convinced, that he was going to, that's what he told Hitler. I'm going to go and stop this war, before it goes any further, and we have many friends in England, and supposedly that's what happened, and he got shot down.
And Hess was also heavily with the pre-Nazi, the occultic groups, the Thule and the Vril Society. Hess was very big into that theosophical occult thing, even before he met Adolf Hitler.
Right.
So he had all this knowledge before the war even started and all these things, and at the end of it, he was, until Charles Manson overtook him, he was the longest-serving prisoner in world history. Like, he had been in there for 20, 30, 40 years at that time when they didn't keep people in jail for very long. He had, like, some crazy world record for it.
Yeah.
There's also a
okay.
Yeah, there's also a theory that the guy that they had there, that they said was Hess, was not Hess. That the real Rudolf Hess had died. Yeah, had died earlier, and there was an imposter being kept there for some arcane reason having to do with the relationship with the Soviets. I couldn't provide more details. I've just heard that theory being bandied about.
Interesting.
I don't know how much I would buy into it, because if it was a double, it's very important to note that Rudolf Hess supposedly died in his cell on the day of like a cosmic conjunction when the stars in the sky aligned at a certain point. It was I forget what the name was. It was something in the mid 70s or something like that, some big astronomical New Age event, and he happened to just drop dead in the middle of the night in Spandau prison.
And they had a whole prison just for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big one too.
They had Albert Speer was there for a while, but then he was let go in the early '60s. It's just Hess never got out. Yeah.
Right. I guess they don't have private detention in prisons there.
So was Hess the one that was the real driver behind the occult stuff with the Nazis and Hitler, or did they have a couple of other people too that were pretty strongly driven?
Himmler, who was the head of the SS, was very heavily involved in that stuff. Very much a mystic, and was involved in revival of Norse and Germanic paganism, and using the symbols in much of the National Socialist symbology, and also very much into the whole mythos around the Knights Templar, and that the SS were the new Knights Templar, this new knightly order that was going to cleanse the world of evil. And he was I think one of the big movers of that whole aspect of the Nazi experience.
Whatever happened to Martin Bormann? I can't remember. I forget.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Some people think he died in the bunker, or near the bunker in Berlin, and then there's others that think he escaped to South America and lived there into the 1960s or 1970s.
I was just looking this up about the Hess, and it says that he tried to get out of prison, citing overcrowding, and he failed every time. Okay, listen. I'm not a big World War II. You like that? Okay. Okay. Let me ask you this, because now, Mike, you're saying that Mike Marinacci, you were saying that you're a big study of Scientology. Now, have you ever noticed all connections to the O.J. Simpson trial to the Church of Scientology?
No, I was not aware there were any. I did not follow the Simpson trial that closely. I know that any time you're involved in Southern California, in Hollywood, in LA, whatever, with the entertainment industry, sooner or later you're going to run into the Scientologists. They have a very big presence there, and I think that's why there has never really been a TV show or movie made that's been an expose of them, or an accurate biopic of Hubbard, who was an absolutely fascinating character. I mean, they kind of did a sort of half-assed one with that movie, The Master, with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix. They kind of lightly based on Hubbard, but really there was 1/100th of the craziness of his life that made it into that film. And I was very disappointed when I saw it, even though I thought both Hoffman and Phoenix were terrific actors, and was very sad to see Hoffman go so early. He was one of my favorites. But no, I think that's just a function of any time you're in the entertainment business around there they have infiltrated it very, very heavily.
Yeah.
Do you think Hoffman was bumped off for portraying their Messiah?
No.
I heard that, but I doubt it. I think he was just he was somewhat like somebody like Johnny Thunders of the New York Dolls. He was a reformed junkie, a reformed addict who decided he could have a little bit for old time's sake, and his body wasn't up to it. He just failed.
If I may, I'm sorry for cutting you all off. If I may interject, it's interesting in that movie that the to beg the pun, the act that substitutes auditing in that film in Scientology is called processing. At the end of the movie, Philip Hoffman and the lady that plays his wife, they're located at a school in England. That entire movie, honestly, is a story about initiation where Joaquin Phoenix plays the profane or the person that would be like initiate into like a mystery school or an occultic thing. And it proceeds through 3 acts, the first 3 steps of initiation. And at the end, Philip Seymour Hoffman says, if you're not with us now, you will never be with us throughout eternity. So it's basically setting it. That movie, if you look at Paul Thomas Anderson's career, he's Boogie Nights, everyone knows that, Punch Drunk Love, what is it, There Will Be Blood. When Boogie Nights came out, when the day Boogie Nights premiered, his father died, and the actor that played the pedophilic producer in Boogie Nights, the Colonel. I don't know how many of you guys know the movie Boogie Nights. Yeah. Both of those actors died on one day and then the day after each other. And Philip Seymour Hoffman has passed away. He frequently uses the music producer John Bryan, which was connected with a very famous Los Angeles and Portland area musician, Elliott Smith, who Paul Thomas Anderson directed a short for, who was found dead with double stab wounds, and it was ruled a suicide, even though...
Elliott Smith.
Yeah. So there's a little... I like Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, but I believe that he might be tied in with a little bit heavy things, especially if you watch the deleted short from The Master. It has this in an entire thing. It's called Slow Boat to China. It's filmed with pieces that were cut out of the movie, and it includes a part where Joaquin Phoenix is left to entrust a secret, a box by himself by Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he opens it, and it's just one single burst of flame. Then he closes the box and never mentions it again. It's left out of the movie. The entire movie is, I found it to be one of the best movies I've seen in a long, long time, but it is very heavy with symbolism and occultic nature. I just wanted to throw that out, and I'm sorry for stepping on the conversation, guys.
No.
That's interesting. Yeah. Just certain things in there I just wondered about why they were put in the movie, like the whole scene in the house, when there's the party and he's imagining all women are nude. And what's that all about?
And Philip Hoffman singing, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's almost like he's seeing through the superficial nature and seeing what is really going on, almost like program breaking, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Emperor's New Clothes.
The Scientologists are, they have their whole cadre of thugs for when they do things that people don't like. And I only know this because I have a psychiatrist friend who was involved in testifying in a case that had some Scientology ties. And this was several years ago, but I mean, I don't know if they've changed, but he had people like ring the doorbell, and when he or his wife came to the door, there'd just be somebody to take a picture of them and then go back out in their car and drive away. And that kind of stuff happened all the time. So while Philip Seymour Hoffman probably wasn't bumped off, nobody knows what stressor, triggered his relapse.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah.
So
they have a long. Yeah.
They're very litigious, and one of their lawyers is Greta Van Susteren.
Yeah. Who was just think how much she molded the OJ trial.
Yeah.
That's where she got famous from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And
why is she hanging out with Lindsay Lohan?
Yeah. Oh, bro, that's a whole nother story. Lindsay Lohan's so deep, forget it.
Yeah. That's. I was going to say that their whole litigious strategy comes from something said by Hubbard himself. He said, anytime we're opposed, anytime we're in trouble, take our opponents to court and just ream them in court. He said something like make flames dance on the roof of the court of the court building. His whole position, it was kind of an inculcated paranoia to his followers that everybody who opposes us, everybody who's outside of the church is either insane, stupid, and or criminal, and should be treated as such. And any opposition to us is, by its very nature and by its very definition, out of bad faith and evil, and should be opposed completely and destroyed completely. It's a very, very dangerous attitude that he started and has been kept going in the church all these years.
Yeah. Well, he was big in the Church of Satan too, with Jack Parsons.
Well, that was the OTO. That's a bit different. I know. Yeah, he was. He was working with. Well, he stole Parsons' girlfriend and his boat and a lot of his money. I know that whole story. And Parsons, of course, came to a very odd end himself. An explosion. There's a couple of very good books about him, biographies of him. One is called Sex and Rockets, and the other one, I forget what it's called, but fascinating character, Jack Parsons.
And he was having an affair with his mother. They're all living in the same house.
That they don't. Yeah, they never confirmed that. There's stories about that. There's stories that the cops found films of him having sex with dogs and weird stuff. And now it's never. There's no real evidence that I've heard those stories, but he was pretty out there for his time. But I don't think he was. I haven't heard anything.
His wife became a protege of Kenneth Anger, right?
Marjorie Cameron.
Cameron. Right.
Yeah.
Now, what do you guys think of this guy Peter Moon and the story he tells about the Parsons and stuff?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with it either.
Okay. He's a frequent guest on a lot of shows.
Well, Peter Moon, I've read some of his books.
Okay.
Now, he claims that Mark Hamill and Duncan Cameron, were making pornos at their beach house. Did you hear that? Did you read that?
Well, there's all kinds of stories about that. Manson stole some video equipment. He was making kiddie porn and porno and stuff like that. And then also Polanski, too, that there was all kind of films in his house as well.
Right.
So, it seems to be a theme.
Involving some fairly famous people, I've heard, or at least that's the rumor that went around, and that it was confiscated allegedly by the LAPD and has never seen the light of day since. But yeah, that story keeps coming up around the Manson case.
And then you got Roy Ray.
Maybe not so much Manson, but the people around the Cielo Drive house and that whole scene were doing this sort of very kinky stuff and recording it on film.
And you got Roy Radin in the Long Island, and all of those stories about the movies that were being done. And I had friends that went to parties in that house too, and they were talking about all the porn stars. Yeah. The porn stars that were out there, and little kids that were at the parties, and there were young kids using drugs and having sex at these parties.
Well, that's a good way to control people. Look at the
right.
You mean like actors like Drew Barrymore and the Feldman and Hames and all that? Wow.
And look at what was that girl? I forget her name now. I forget. I can't remember.
The one from the Welcome Back, Kotter?
No, the one. Oh no, not Melanie Holland. No, not her. But the other one, the one that she was in a movie Pretty Baby with the.
Oh yeah.
Brooke Shields.
Brooke Shields, right?
Brooke
And
yeah.
somehow, some way, got taken under the wing of Bob Hope. And was involved in everything with Bob Hope, every Bob Hope special, Bob Hope tours and stuff like that. What was up with that?
There's a lot of stories about Bob Hope and MK Ultra program. Yeah.
Not even to mention Blue Lagoon. I mean, that's basically sanctioned child pornography. I mean, no offense to everyone involved, but really that is underage child nudity.
Well, her first movie was Pretty Baby, which played a teenage prostitute.
The 70s, it was a different time. And, now forget ever doing something like that again. But really, this stuff was fairly common in the 70s.
It raises its ugly head every few years. They try to get it to look more normal. Look at this. The woman
That's true.
Girls. What's her name? Mm-hmm. The land.
Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you all remember those? Do y'all remember those Calvin Klein ads?
Yeah.
That came out in the late '90s.
Oh yeah.
With the guy going, how do you look? Why don't you smile? Thought that was like the creepiest thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Well, one thing I was going to bring up before when we were talking about the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman, the heroin overdose. Now, what about this whole story about Heath Ledger when he died of an overdose, and that the Olsen twins had? Do you guys know this story? That they had their own Blackwater reaction team that went in there and cleaned up the house. They had mercenaries. That the Olsen twins have a team of mercenaries working for them.
They're billionaires.
Yeah, they're billionaires. Yeah.
Well, they're called cleaners. You know what I'm saying? They're called cleaners for a reason, bro. You got to remove that evidence from there. And then what goes on to happen? You see a million Joker memes around everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And everybody.
Right,
You in Las Vegas, you know what I'm talking about, man. It's at one point I'm not really like a conspiracy person, but some of this stuff does tie in a little bit too much.
I'll tell you this, my former partner was NYPD Harbor Aviation, okay, and these were all guys that were ex Navy SEALs and stuff like that. These are really elite cops, they jump out of helicopters, they dive into water, they save people. They say that plane Sully landed the plane in the harbor there, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. They rescued the people off the top of the World Trade Center. Now, they used to recruit. My partner used to recruit guys for Blackwater. Now, did you guys know that what's that guy? The guy who did the Fahrenheit.
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore has a Blackwater.
Yeah.
His bodyguards are Blackwater guys.
Wow.
The same guys that were over there in Iraq defending that guy who was involved in 9/11.
Yeah.
Some of the same guys.
You know what's funny? In that video documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11.
Bremer. There was the Ambassador Bremer. He had a Blackwater team over there in Iraq, and some of the same guys, the same actual people defending him, were walking around defending Michael Moore.
But they're also doing all the work for Monsanto.
Yeah, I bet they are,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. What?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, in Fahrenheit 9/11, he comes right up to that line of accusing the Bushes of 9/11 being an inside job, but he doesn't cross it.
Right.
But, I mean, he ties the Bushes with the Bin Laden and Bass and, how they were in bed together, and all that, but with the Saudis, but he doesn't come and say it was an inside job,
Yeah, he likes living in that $5 million house on the lake.
Yeah.
So
probably like living, period.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Because he's got that team around him now. Who knows if they're guarding him or they have him in prison?
Oh yeah, they go either way.
Because there's a fine line when you got bodyguards around. Okay, we're at the half hour. Cindy, you want to take a little break here and play some commercials? So we take a little break here and get a glass of water. Okay.